A place to rest. A lone man dragged his feet across the pavement, briefcase pulling his shoulder down as the simmering cracked asphalt stretched into the swaying tall grass of the horizon. His bald head glistened with perspiration and he reached up and loosened the collar of his now stained white, button-up shirt. Barely had the sun risen and already the heat was stifling. Unfortunately, he was far removed from any air-conditioned shelter. The only landmarks were the weather-beaten telephone poles lining the road. They stood silhouetted against the reddish-pink hue of the dawn light, dark sentinels whose long shadows stretched out to grasp at his resolve. "Meet me at dawn." Delgrave Road. His heart had sunk when Hal had spoken those words. Delgrave? Why there? Hal smirked. "What's the matter, Tom? Scared of a few ghost stories?" "I mean, yeah. Aren't you? People have gone missing there." "Doesn't mean shit. It's a stretch of abandoned road in the middle of nowhere. Those disappearances are just drug deals gone bad. Shit like that." Tom looked unconvinced. "Look," Hal sighed. "Do you want my product?" Tom looked at his feet. "Yes." "Okay. I'm the seller, so I picked the spot. And I picked Delgrave. Is that going to be a problem? Because there are others who will pay for what I got." Tom put his hands in his pockets and chewed his lip. He looked into Hal's eyes. They were cold and bottomless. The image of a rat drowning flashed across his mind. No, that'll be fine." That last grin Hal gave him before they parted still stretched behind Tom's eyes. It had looked hungry. Despite his reservations, however, he had shown up. But where the hell was Hal? And how much further did he have to walk? He raised his face to the sky and let out a groan that quickly caught in his throat. His briefcase clattered onto the ground. A shape crouched atop the nearest pole. It was a pitch-black outline of starless night against the pink-tinted clouds, with powerful arms resting atop bent knees and two long, dark horns curving out from the sides of its head in obscenely large proportion to their carrier. The entirety of the figure was darkness, save for two stark, bright pinpricks for eyes. They shone with a predatory coldness and Tom was transfixed in their pale, pupil-less light. His feet had already been unconsciously creeping backward before he snapped back to. He cried out, turned and ran the way he had come with a new surge of energy that one only gets when they know their life depends on it. He didn't hear any steps behind him. Thank God. He slowed down and tried to regain his breath. What the fuck was that? A demon? Stories he had heard came flooding back. They never should have built that road through there, his grandmother had told him when he was young. That field is not ours. Then whose? He chuckled. I mean, nobody lives there. He never forgot the way his grandma's mouth had tightened into a straight line and her eyes grew dark. I wish that were true. There's a reason your mother won't let you play there. He shook his head. This was not worth it. Hal could find business elsewhere. After a few minutes of walking, he realized the sky had grown no brighter. It still had that pinkish dawn hue, that surreal half-light before the sun is entirely above the horizon. Surely it should be lighter by now. Up ahead, he made out an object lying on the road. He squinted and then felt his blood freeze. It was the briefcase. Tom looked slowly up at the telephone pole nearest to the case and nearly shat himself as those wide eyes met his own. This time, there was no deer in the headlights moment. He turned heel and hauled ass into the tall grass. Green whipped at his arms, his legs, his face. He didn't care. Anything to get away, to hide from that. The rhyme his grandmother had told him echoed in his ears. In the fields, it is said, there is a man with eyes of dread. Up ahead, the grass began to thin. Had he already made it through the field? Maybe there was a gas station or something. Somewhere he could get help. He barreled out of the tall grass and onto the road. The briefcase sat mockingly on the ground before him. And the figure no longer roosted above but stood across from him. It was ungodly tall, at least 7 feet or so. No, he said, frantically swiveling his head to and fro. The road stretched in both directions, endless and unchanging. No. This isn't possible. Back into the tall grass he ran. He ran, and he ran, and he ran. You may run, you may hide. But the man will take you inside. Tom burst out of the grass and screamed. The figure was right in front of him, towering above. It seized him by the shoulders, its touch freezing even through his shirt. His vocal cords strained, but his scream ceased as all the air in his lungs and body was sucked out upon contact. He felt all the blood vessels beneath his skin burst and soon even those in his eyes, though unfortunately he could still see perfectly fine. He could see the black figure open from face to navel into a vertical mouth, a horrible giant maw with obsidian teeth from which slavered several dripping tongues covered in tiny wriggling, almost finger-like appendages groping towards him. The last thing he felt before darkness took him was the saliva on his tongue beginning to boil and his bones turning to jelly. Vision returned not with a start, but slowly. The lenses of his eyes took time to focus. Little by little, his surroundings came into view. He was perched high, looking out over a field. The tall, green grass swayed gracefully in the breeze. Warm pride swelled in his chest. My field. My field? He thought confusedly. He looked down at the wooden beam he crouched on far above the ground. Pitch-black does curled over the edge. My field, a chorus of voices echoed. They were men and women, old and young. In the man, you will find. The body dies, but not the mind. He flexed black fingers as a ravenous hunger grew within. My field. My land. Hunt, the multitude hissed. Feed. Yes. Hunt, he would. They all would. Their family was too small. They could use a few new members. From their perch atop the weather-beaten telephone pole they would wait and watch, with eyes as cold as they were hungry. Blind curve. The snow was coming down harder now, the flurries growing larger and gaining in intensity with the coming darkness. Not at all a situation any normal woman would care to find herself in. Yet there I stood, alone, hungry, waiting. Minutes passed until at last I saw the headlights of an automobile in the distance coming toward me. I took a few steps closer to the edge of the pavement. I could hear the full-throated sound of the exhaust as it drew near, then slowed before coming to a stop. The car sat there, idling. It was an old vehicle, a dark four-door sedan of some kind. The windows as well as the rest of it fully covered in snow, except for the front windshield. The wipers struggled dutifully to keep it clean. Finally, the passenger side window opened halfway. "Are you okay, miss? Do you need a ride?" a man's voice asked. Before I could respond, he spoke again. "I'm heading on into Madison if that helps." "That would be great, it's getting pretty cold out here," I replied. "Hang on, that door wants to stick when it's cold," he said. I waited patiently as he made his way around to the passenger side and then tugged on the door until it opened. He swung the door wide and then said, "There you go, miss, all ready for ya." He was an older, heavy-set man with large hands and a sparse beard. He wore a thick wool sweater and a black fedora which he kept pulled down low just above his eyes. I slid into the seat and began brushing the snow from my clothes as he shut the door sharply behind me. The interior of the car smelled of stale beer and cigarette smoke. A couple of empty bottles clanked together on the floorboard as I settled my feet. "My name's Jack," he said, as he worked the gear shift. The transmission made a groaning sound. The old sedan lurched forward leaving a plume of blue smoke behind it. "Nice to meet you, Jack. My name is Cassandra and I appreciate you stopping to help me." "Well now, that's a nice name," he said. "Kind of rolls right off the tongue. I don't think I've ever ever known anyone named Cassandra." "Well, thank you. It's an old name actually of Greek origin." I told him. "That's interesting. Anyway, it's my pleasure. No way I'm gonna pass on by and leave a young lady out in this to freeze to death. Oh no, let it never be said that old Jack didn't have a good heart. It's just a lucky thing that I came along, what with some of the things that go on out on these roads at night." I nodded in agreement. He cracked his window and reached for a pack of cigarettes on the dashboard. "Do you mind?" he asked. "Not at all," I replied. I watched as the lighter sparked and a thin ribbon of flame ignited the tip of the cigarette. He took a long, deep draw. "So your car's broke down, I guess?" "I'm afraid so, and if that's not bad enough, my cell phone is dead." "Well, don't you worry, we'll be in Madison before too long and when we get there you can charge up your phone. I know a guy who runs a garage on Thornton Street, he'll send out a wrecker for your car." "Again, thank you." "Sure thing. So do you live in Madison, Cassandra?" "No, I'm on my way to visit some people there. How about you? What brings you out on a night like this? Going on a trip?" I asked, motioning toward the leather suitcase in the back seat. He glanced back at the suitcase, then took another long draw before answering. "No, That's just my good clothes and shoes and things. I need to attend a funeral tomorrow, and with the weather like it is I thought I might better head out tonight. They say it may be worse in the morning." "I'm very sorry to hear that," I said. "Well, there's a lady I used to work with at the post office. It's her daughter. I'm a retired mail carrier, you know." He shook his head. "It's a shame too. She was a pretty young thing." "So how did it happen, Jack? I mean, if you don't mind me asking?" "She was murdered," he said solemnly. "It was gruesome. They found her naked body in a dumpster at a construction site." "My God, that's horrible," I said. "Well, it gets even crazier, believe it or not. Her mom told me that it looked like strips of her skin had been cut and peeled off like pieces of bacon or something. It would take a sick sort of bastard to do something like that. There's a lot of evil in this old world, that's for sure. A whole lot of evil." I shook my head but remained quiet. "Death is a crazy thing though," he said. "One minute you're young and happy with your whole life in front of you, and the next you're in the cold, cold ground. I think that's the scariest part of it really, not knowing when. I mean, it's out there somewhere, coming for all of us sooner or later, like some big dark cat stalking each one of us. All it takes is one wrong move, one bad decision, and it's all over. Just like that poor girl. She was 18. It sounds like you've put quite a bit of thought into it, Jack." He lit another smoke, then turned to me and said, "Too much probably." The conversation lagged after that. Mile after mile passed without another word between us. I didn't mind. I was content to watch the snowflakes sacrifice themselves on the front windshield only to melt away harmlessly. I looked forward to the end of the drive and a good hot meal. Eventually, I began to notice a change in Jack's demeanor. He seemed deep in thought, preoccupied. From time to time I would hear him whisper or mutter words or phrases under his breath. More than once I had caught him steal a glance at me, then look quickly back at the road. His gloved hand slid nervously back and forth on the steering wheel. Suddenly, he turned to me and said, "Cassandra, I hate to ask you this, and it's a little embarrassing," but he hesitated before continuing. "It's another few miles before town or even the next rest stop, and I could really stand to use the restroom." I raised my hand and said, "Not a problem, Jack, I understand, really." "Great," he said. "It's just that a man my age..." Again, I raised my hand. "It's fine, seriously, I mean, it's not like you're going to pull over somewhere and kill me, right?" He stared at me for a second, then we both laughed. "I'll tell you what, there's a gravel road a little ways up on your side. I used to deliver mail there years ago, just a single house, but the family have long since gone. If you could help me look for it, I'll pull off there. I won't be long, I promise." You see, that was the ploy he used. The excuse to get me away, all to himself, to do whatever he wanted. The trap had been set and would soon be sprung. "Wait, is that it?" I said, pointing. "Yes it is, little lady," he said in a jovial voice. The old sedan slowed and then turned. Gravel crunched softly beneath the tires and the dual exhaust purred as we crept farther from the safety of the highway. The snow had stopped by now and a full moon appeared from behind the clouds. We passed a rusted sign that read "Blind Curve." The cold rays soon revealed a house long since abandoned. Planks and plywood covered both the doors and windows. The old home sat in sad disrepair. A broken-down swing set stood as a reminder of a place where children once played. The tires spun a little as Jack dropped the old sedan into low gear and pulled alongside the house and into the backyard. He placed the car in park and set the brake. He then slid the seat back as far as it would go. Reaching back, he opened the suitcase and retrieved a bundle of zip ties which he placed on his lap. He took off the gloves and turned on the dome light. A soft glow now filled the interior of the sedan. Jack removed the fedora and placed it gently on the dashboard. "You see these?" he said, raising a large gnarled finger to his brow. A series of X's had been carved one after another into the skin of his forehead. His thin lips parted into a broad smile while his tongue licked each chipped and yellowed tooth. "You see these?" he shouted. 18 of them. One for every bitch like you that was stupid enough to take a ride with old Jack." He tapped again at the incisions, the smile growing wider. "You know what happens now, little Miss 19? I politely returned the smile and said, "Actually, I do." His screams shattered the silence of the winter's night. His eyes darted wildly from side to side as I ripped open his ribcage and laid hold of his still-beating heart. Then, using only a single claw, cut it free of its restraints and pulled out my bloody prize. I watched as his body twitched and his legs kicked, then fell still. I drank deeply of the sweet aortic blood and savored every morsel of the fresh warm meat. Poor Jack, there was so much he didn't know, couldn't know. He thought he had just happened upon me and that it would be his lucky night. He had no idea that it was he who had stepped into my trap or that it was I who had laid in wait for him. I, who possessed the gift of foresight as well as the ability to take on any form I so desire. Be it man, woman, child, whichever best serves my needs. A being of superior intellect who easily adapts to any culture and can quickly master any language. Skills practiced and perfected over many ages. It was his face I saw as I left my lair and walked toward the highway. I knew exactly when he would come along, nothing was hidden from me. I had seen it all. I was well aware of his intentions, how he had cleverly tampered with the passenger side door so that it couldn't be opened from inside. The window that lowered only halfway to impede his victim's escape. The suitcase that contained his tools of torture, the abandoned house, yes, all of it. Oh, he was a bad one, a killer, a predator, but that made no difference to me. I hadn't fed in days and indeed he would be my next meal. For me, the hunt is simply a means to an end, no one more deserving of their fate than the next. The use of deceit, even that, born not of malice but instead necessity. I must survive, and to survive I must eat, and to eat I must kill. It's different here in this world. There are those who stalk and take their own kind, their own species. I do admit I take some pleasure in their demise. That moment when they first realize that they're no longer the hunter but instead the prey. The panicked eyes, that look of sheer terror as they witness the transformation to my true form before devouring them. Yes, there is a certain satisfaction in that case. I'll have all I need for a while here. Food, warmth, a place to hide until I again feel the need to hunt. Thanks, Jack. You did have a good heart after all. Humans are such frail creatures, so easily fooled, but so very, very, delicious. If you see a girl with purple eyes on Tinder, don't swipe right. I had just got out of college and took a job as an actuary at an insurance company. It's a job that requires little interaction with other people. I originally picked it because I used to think I liked to be alone. But, damn it, not anymore. The job far away from my family and I didn't have any friends in the area. I didn't think it would be a problem, but after 6 months, it became unbearable. Another thing that bothered me was my lack of a romantic life. I had always put off looking for a girlfriend. I'll do it later, I thought, even though I was 23 and still never had a girlfriend. I was beginning to crave some romantic attention, so I decided to download Tinder. I had heard about it a lot on YouTube and Instagram. A simple premise for a dating app. Swipe right on the ones you like, swipe left on the ones you don't. If one of the people you swiped right on did the same for you, you could chat. It seemed harmless enough, and maybe I could find a girlfriend. I downloaded it, put my best pictures, and wrote a bio. I won't lie. I spent a lot of time on that app in the coming weeks. I was swiping whenever I could. Some accounts had Instagram or Snapchat handles. I attempted to message the girls I saw on their accounts, but I never got an answer. I must have messaged 30 different girls' accounts, but nothing. I never got any matches or likes either. I looked up tips on how to get more matches online. I applied them all, but I still got no results. To put it lightly, my confidence was destroyed. Was I ugly? So ugly that no girl swiped right? Maybe I was too picky? No, those didn't sound right. I don't think I'm ugly, especially not in my meticulously chosen pictures, and I certainly wasn't too picky. I always gave girls the benefit of the doubt, even if I didn't like their smile or they seemed to be not my type. I didn't swipe right on every profile, no. But, I swiped right on most. Something that bothered me even more than the fact that I got no matches was the fact that I got no likes. Apparently, you can see the number of people who swiped right on you, but to see their profiles, you needed the premium membership. But, it was irrelevant due to the fact that there were no profiles that swiped right on me. I got desperate. I'm not ashamed to admit that I began going on an in-app purchase spending spree. I spent at least $100 to get all the features and more. Even with this though, nothing came of it. But as I was beginning to lose hope, something happened. It was 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I was swiping through Tinder, and then I saw the most beautiful girl I ever saw on the app. Her name was Alexandria. She had fiery red hair, long and straight. An amazing body with seductive curves and milky white skin that looked flawless. There was something odd about her though. Her eyes. I'll never forget them. They were dark purple. It looked so natural, but I just figured they were colored contacts. Her bio said, "Swipe right to be comforted." I swiped right, and my heart began to beat rapidly once I saw, for the first time ever, that I got a match. And with a beautiful girl I just swiped on. I fumbled to send a message. "Hey, I'm Sam. I'm really happy to meet you, you're my first match." The reply was immediate. "Hello Sam. I'm Alexandria. I'm happy to meet you too." I couldn't believe this was happening. "You're really beautiful." "Thanks Sam. I think you're very handsome. Do you like my eyes?" "Haha yeah. Do you wear those contacts all the time?" "That is my natural eye color." I didn't believe her. But, she was serious. She told me it was exceedingly rare, but that some have the odd coloration. Less than 1% of children are born with purple eyes, she told me. I didn't know if to believe her or not, but I disregarded it and moved on. It turns out Alexandria was just my type, funny, honest, smart, and adventurous. We chatted for 4 hours straight before I fell asleep. When I woke up, we decided to meet up the next day at a local park in my area. I half expected her to be a catfish, or an old man in a dress and a wig or something crazy like that, but no. She was there and she was even more beautiful in real life. We walked around and had a great conversation. And, for the first time in my life, I kissed a girl on the lips. It was the happiest day of my life. I knew I had to be with her. I needed her. We began dating. My family was so impressed by her when I took her over for the holidays. They were blown away by her beauty and her charm. It seemed like wherever Alexandria went, she put smiles on everyone's faces. My dad patted me on the back and told me that I found a keeper. I didn't value my family's input too much, but this just seemed to cement in my head how perfect Alexandria was for me. I always wanted to meet Alexandria's family too, but she always told me that I would sometime in the future. I couldn't find out anything about her family. She had no siblings and she never talked about her parents. I wanted to know, but I didn't want to upset her, so I never pried. About 4 months after we had met, Alexandria moved in with me, and everything was perfect for a few months, but, then, my lungs began to feel heavy and breathing became a lot more difficult. I would cough up blood every now and again too. I told Alexandria and she didn't look worried or upset when I told her. I thought it was weird, but I could have sworn she had a look of something akin to disappointment. I went to the doctor. He did blood tests, MRIs, EKGs, and X-rays, but nothing seemed wrong except one thing. My lungs were a lot weaker than they should be for someone my age with no history of lung problems. There was nothing he could do, aside from giving me a couple of shots. He told me to go to the ER if it got really bad. I was worried but I continued on with my life. My lungs were a nuisance. I couldn't run or go on long walks like I used to like to do, but I began to get adjusted to my new condition. But, eventually I began to get tired more easily, even if I wasn't doing anything. Things got worse when Alexandria began working more. Something was wrong with her. She didn't talk to me like she used to. She barely paid attention to me at all. She would work late. I normally would be asleep when she got home, but, one night I couldn't sleep and I heard her come home. She went into the kitchen and it sounded like there was someone else in there with her. I turned over in my bed to try to hear better. He didn't last as long as I expected. I heard her whisper, and then a deep voice responded. "Yes, I venture to say he only has a few days left. What will I do once he dies?" "Patience, child. We will find another life form for you to feed off of soon enough." "Is Claire working on finding the replacement?" "Yes, we have a few lined up." "Good." They kept whispering, but I didn't bother to listen. I fell asleep. I was too weak to think about it. But, the next day I remembered the interaction Alexandria had the previous night. I thought maybe it was a dream, but I knew it wasn't. I knew my time was coming. I'm typing this before I die. I don't know what Alexandria is, but I wish we never met. All I can say is, if you see a girl with purple eyes on Tinder, don't swipe right. The Angel. A few years ago, a mother and father decided they needed a break, so they wanted to head out for a night on the town. They called their most trusted babysitter. When the babysitter arrived, the two children were already fast asleep in bed, so the babysitter just got to sit around and make sure everything was okay with the children. Later that night, the babysitter got bored and went to watch TV. but she couldn't watch it downstairs because they did not have cable downstairs. The parents didn't want children watching too much garbage. So, she called them and asked them if she could watch cable in the parents' room. Of course, the parents said it was okay, but the babysitter had one final request. She asked if she could cover up the angel statue outside the bedroom window with a blanket or cloth, at the very least close the blinds, because it made her nervous. The phone line was silent for a moment, and the father who was talking to the babysitter at the time said, "Take the children and get out of the house. We will call the police. We do not have an angel statue." The police found all 3 of the house occupants dead within 3 minutes of the call. No angel statue was ever found.